build up teams to do this. The only danger in doing that is then you run the risk of sort of losing your one-to-one connection, your authenticity with that audience that someone else is sort of posting on your behalf. But ultimately, it's sort of what you have to do to be able to be to do it at some level of scale and real meaning.
But I think that's the critical point, is that these fandoms are communities, right? These creators are community managers. They need to be thinking about this in terms of not just what platform is going to give me the most audience, but where is my audience now? They may be the thing that this fandom, this community first coalesced around. But the only way that the gravity of that increases is through managing the community and making sure the community is healthy outside of the content that you're feeding into it.
You can also use the content to create a broader universe than just you, right? And I think one thing that really attracted us to partnering, frankly, with Ryan Toy's Review is that they have created kind of a universe of characters that include like a puppet and animated characters and other things that help you sort of broaden the IP and characters and things that your community is in love with. And then that does take some of the burden off of the central creator. And when you're dealing with like a 7-year-old, like the way we are, even though he has an insatiable appetite to make videos, we are certainly trying to, put other types of content out there that is related to Ryan, whether that's a game or animated characters or puppets or whatever, in order to sort of take some of that pressure off being the community manager or being sort of, at the center of it all the time. And now we actually take our other partners and we sort of create those universes and worlds with additional characters in collaboration with them.
Okay. And to that point, like, creators have obviously matured, the whole space has, from the days of someone in their home with their laptop and iMovie and kind of chopping up a YouTube video and putting it out there. They have teams, they're basically media companies unto themselves. But then when you go to some place like VidCon and you talk to the fans that are running around there, they're still talking about these creators like they're their friends. They even call them as much. And so I'm curious how, especially creators who are on that bigger level, are kind of managing that balance between having that community, having that intimacy, while at the same time they have these big businesses that they're running.
I think that's part of the magic, right? It's about creating the sense that the individual watching your content has that relationship with you, and I think they realize that there's a certain amount of scale. They realize that Emma Chamberlain or whoever, Ninja, whoever else, has millions and millions of fans, and that he or she may not be talking directly to that person, but they craft their content. They build their engagement in a way that it makes them feel that way. And it's a bit of a more intimate, sort of viewing experience. I sort of analogize it to, movie stars were untouchable because you were in the dark with a whole group of people watching them on the screen. They were sort of far away. You went up, you saw them on the street. You would never think to sort of approach Brad Pitt or George Clooney on the street. TV stars were a little bit more accessible because they were in your home, but they were still up on this screen. They were still sort of an untouchable type of celebrity. But an influencer, or a YouTube star, or whatever you want to call them, you were watching them on your laptop, in your bed, sort of in a very intimate setting. You were able to send them a note, and sometimes you would get a response back on Twitter or this or that. It was much more of a two-way sort of relationship, which was just more intimate. And so YouTube star would walk down the street, and a fan would run up to them and be like, I got your comment. You gave it to me, and give them a big hug. And they're like, who are you? And don't you remember? You said this to me, and you said that to me. And it was like they really do believe that there's that connection there and that they're friends. And to the point of the panel on the power of influence, that's really powerful.
Yeah, we certainly see it with the younger audiences, too. So many kids who watch our creators on YouTube, we hear anecdotes and about them, really seeing the creators as just like them. And I think that's a really important thing that drives that relationship, is that kid is just like me. And that leads to this conceit where they're like, well, why can't we have a play date? Or why can't we get together? And I think there is the just like me, and he likes the same things I like. And, I think that's a big part of what creates that intimacy.
And I just want to underline for younger audiences, certainly the importance of authenticity goes across all media for them, meaning we're a studio creating scripted content for Hulu and Netflix and YouTube Premium. But the first thing we think about when we're creating the content, again, is the authenticity and the relevance to the audience. And that, I do believe, is coming from their access and the importance on these social media platforms to those relationships. So it really does inform the way that they consume all content, that connection.
Shut up and take my money.
And that raises an interesting point, because you can have a creator who came up, people watch their YouTube videos and they saw kind of the real person, and then they get into a scripted show or a movie. And I'm curious if there is anything that needs to be done to have the audience see them in a different light, or see that, you know, these two aren't exactly the same. This is a character and this is the person over here.
I think the audience is really attuned to it, and I think that you see it going both ways, meaning we had a movie on Netflix this past summer, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, which was an enormous, enormous hit. And there's a young man, an actor, Noah Centineo, who had worked before, and on Instagram, the weekend it opened, was under 1 million subscribers on Instagram. One weekend, 5 million. Right now, he's at 17 million. And I think that that speaks to, it's a great movie, it's a wonderful movie, but it also speaks to the audience wanting to know more about him, to find out that relationship, and to connect in that way. So they love him as an actor, but they're also interested in that. And that's part of what Awesomeness, also I feel like being early into the space, building those strong and powerful relationships with the talent is also kind of helping manage that. But I think that the audience is very attuned at it, and for the influencer who wants to become an actor, I really think there's a lot of opportunity.
Got it. And with someone like Noah Centineo or Alana Condor, the other star of the movie, those were people who, they came up the traditional Hollywood route. But, you know, since they blew up with the movie, are they starting to think more like an influencer, like, you know, beyond just posting to Instagram, but doing other things, you know, that would be, that we would think of being more of a, you know, digital influencer type of thing, as opposed to the traditional celebrity where I'm only doing movies and TV?
I think it's really on a case-by-case basis whether or not they want to create that content. Those two have a lot of acting opportunities right now. She rolled right into a series. So I think it's on a case-by-case, but I think at a minimum, what you're talking about, that Instagram experience and knowing who they are, and certainly the branded opportunities available to kids coming off of, you know, hit Netflix shows or hit Hulu or, you know, Amazon shows. I think there's a lot there that it has to be part of how they're thinking about it. But the great news is that's how they're consuming content too. So they're ready and they're willing and they understand the power of it.
If you had, just to pose a question, right, to illustrate the point, if you were the head of a movie studio that was putting together a movie and you had the choice between a lead actor that had 35 million Instagram followers and someone that wasn't engaging on the platform really at all, but then they were equally right for the role, who would you choose and why? Right? That person can create interest around that project before the project even comes to fruition. The behind the scenes, I'm so excited for this role, I'm prepping, here's the first picture of me on set, here's that, it's a marketing tool in some regard for, you know, again, the power of influence to have that type of, connection with the audience that's predisposed to wanting to watch that project.
I'd even go further to say that it's a fame that translates, right? It's like, you know, again, when we're launching things into other platforms, irrespective, you know, I don't think we've ever done a promotion for the series that we launched on Hulu, but they're frankly doing extraordinarily well, right? In the top of all kids and family programming on Hulu, because the brands were recognized, right? That the creator brand, when a parent or their kid saw it, it was recognized and they clicked on it and they watched it, you know? And I think that even beyond the promotion that they can do.
And I think that is real influence, the ability to drive from one platform to another. And certainly something that we spend a lot of time thinking about in marketing is how do you use Instagram interest to drive to Hulu or, so we have specially created marketing campaigns, and we're working very closely with the talent to give them the assets to put on their Instagram account that speak to generating excitement.
And to that point, I'm curious, whether the platforms, be it a Netflix or a Hulu or an Instagram, a Facebook, a TikTok, but especially these platforms that are, more recently trying to work with influencers, they seem to be really recognizing the power of these influencers, the hold they have on their audiences. Something like the launch of IGTV last year, Instagram worked with a whole bunch of influencers to be part of that launch. It wasn't just traditional celebrities. And I'm curious if each of you are seeing that come up more and more.
Worked for fire.
Sorry. God.
Well, I think this was
true story. Had to be said.
This was the question for a long time that's being answered now: is can influencers, can celebrities of this type drive at retail? Can they drive installs in games? Can they? And we're answering those one by one. The partnership that we have with PocketWatch right now, there's a question of can an audience as young as Ryan's get excited about a game and then their parents allow them to go and download the game? And we're seeing that, that influence translates into user acquisition, which is the most expensive and difficult part of game development these days.
But what works for one, let's just call it influencer, may not work for another, right? I think the idea that an influencer with the right audience, with the right product, with the right distribution or whatever the case may be, can drive very real audience in some regard, and then others
to be authentic,
don't convert nearly as well because for a myriad of reasons.
I would argue it's also about doing all of it, right? We don't look at these opportunities as transactional for one thing, right? We didn't just launch a game, right? It was about taking that creator brand that had these creator brands that have large audiences on these digital platforms, but then doing all the work with all the different types of partners necessary to bring those brands everywhere where kids and families are, right? That's kind of our goal. And that means you don't just get a product on the shelves at Walmarts and Targets, right? You have to work with lots of licensees. You have to we have a full-time employee in Bentonville. You've got to go through all these gates, right? And have experience on how to manage that versus, the frictionless platforms like YouTube and Instagram where anybody can post anything and get big. All the other extensions, Netflix or, all these other extensions require a lot of experience and companies like the one sitting up here really push the ecosystem to embrace it. And I think we all work really, really hard to do that.
Right. Because it comes down to the idea of influence as a form of currency, and how do the influencers then use that currency, but not to the point where it devalues it in any respect.
It has to be authentic and organic, everything. Like even for 7-year-old Ryan, he is the creative director for his consumer products line. When we say that, we mean it. He is, because if then he is expected to play with that product or wear that product or whatever it is, he has to really love it and be emotionally invested in it in order for the fans not to see through that, see through it. So it's super important that the creators and stars that you're working with are involved probably more deeply than in the traditional world.
But there's a difference between fandom, right? So there's a lot of YouTube channels out there or Instagram pages. We'll use meme pages as an example, right? Hundreds of millions of subscribers or followers or impressions or whatever you want to call it, but that would not necessarily convert the way that somebody like a Shane Dawson or a Ryan or whomever would convert, where the fandom around that individual or that brand is just much more voracious and much stronger than a generic thing that I don't mean to be pejorative using the term generic, but a non, sort of real creator at the heart of it, or a brand, or something that can talk back to you, it's sort of a general entertainment platform, can convert, even though the numbers may be the same.
It's a great point.
Fortunately, we're out of time, but thank you all for taking the time. Thank you all.